Folks, even in this tough economy in America 2020, there's still a way you can provide economic dignity for yourself and your family in your work life. Want to find out what it is? It's one of the two topics I'll be talking about today. Welcome to Balancing the Scales, the Economic Justice Report. This is your host, Vic Bernsdorf, and on today's show we're going to be talking about these two topics. We're going to be looking at the voting records of Senator John Barrasso and Senator Michael Bennet. And then we're going to be talking about the importance of the labor union movement. Let's start first by looking at the voting records of a Republican and a Democrat to see who really supports the American people and who supports big business and the 1%. Let's start with the voting record of Republican Senator John Barrasso. Have a look at this chart. This chart is a compilation of Mr. Barrasso's complete voting record on a number of issues. As you can see, Mr. Barrasso, a Republican, is against these issues. He's against taxing businesses, getting money out of politics. He's against consumer protections, disaster relief, funding education. He's against environmental protection, against any kind of gun control or humane immigration policies. He's against labor rights, taxing the wealthy, and having a robust safety net. So basically, but Republican Senator Barrasso does support big business as well as taxing the middle class. Isn't that wonderful, huh? You know, it's obvious this Republican senator has a history of voting against the middle class and the working class. Now let's take a look at the voting record of Democratic Senator Michael Bennet as a comparison. Senator Bennet supports taxing businesses, funding education. He supports environmental regulation, gun control, public health, foreign and humanitarian aid, a humane immigration policy, labor rights and wages, internet freedom, taxing the wealthy, and having a robust safety net. So, after this party ideology comparison segment, don't forget two things, okay? Number one, that the political positions of the senators I've just mentioned are based on their entire voting record, going back to their very first vote. So we can know, without any doubt, who these senators support and who they don't. Number two, as Americans never forget that we are the government. The men and women I mentioned in this show segment are representatives that are supposed to work for the American people, not corporations. So in the next election cycle in your district, examine every senator or congressman's voting record before you vote to make sure they share your values and will fight for economic justice on your behalf. And you can do that by going to, well, one site called politics.work.com to see who is on your side, because that website compiles the entire voting record going back to the very first vote. So you can easily come to your own conclusions as to who has your back and who doesn't. Okay, on to the next economic justice story. Okay, this next show segment is all about the importance of the labor union movement. Before I start, let me just say that the reason I'm talking about labor unions today in this segment is because they're not really talked about much in school these days. Just the high school curriculum, college curriculum, they don't really talk about the labor union movement in depth. And it's really important to know what labor unions are and what they do and how they help employees level the playing field with the corporation that they work for. So, let's give you an overview. Let's start by defining what a labor union is. A labor union is an organization that acts as an intermediary between its members, the employees, and the business that employs those workers. Now, the main purpose of a labor union is to give workers the power to negotiate for good pay and good working conditions, so workers can live a dignified life. This is achieved through something called collective bargaining, basically using the power of all workers through a labor union team that negotiates with an employer. And the result is workers achieving good economic benefits, which allows them to live in dignity. Let's watch this video and come back and talk about it.
Unions are the backbone of the labor movement. But what exactly did they accomplish? Well, for one, you can thank the labor movement for your work-free weekend. In the late 1800s, the average American worked as much as 100 hours a week. Unions held strikes to demand shorter work weeks and an 8-hour workday to make time for family and relaxation. The labor movement also protested child labor. Remember those black and white photos of children with dirty, sad faces wearing overalls and beanie caps? Those kids weren't playing outside, but they were working in factories. In 1881, unions demanded that businesses stop hiring kids under 14, and slowly but surely, measures against child labor caught on around the country. Eventually, all those protests got results. In 1938, Congress passed a law called the Fair Labor Standards Act, which set the 40-hour work week, regulated child labor, and set standards for minimum wage and overtime pay. In the 1930s and 1940s, workers were also able to negotiate health benefit plans from their employers. Though union membership is on a decline today, it's undeniable that the labor movement forever changed the way Americans live, work, and even relax.
Okay, part of the reason I'm talking about labor unions is because I spent 17 years in public service under a labor union. Specifically, I worked for private companies for about 20 years, and then I transitioned over to the public sector working as a wastewater operator for about 17 years before I retired. I'll tell you something. When I worked in the private sector, I was laid off 3 times. And I'll tell you, each time was a horrific experience. Having a labor union go to bat for you is an incredible feeling. Okay? And like I said, working in the public sector was the best decision I ever made. Primarily because of that. Basically because my income was not under threat anymore. As it was when I was working without representation in the private sector. Besides employment security and workplace protections, labor unions, under a memorandum of understanding called the MOU, they typically provide these additional benefits. COLAs, which are cost of living adjustments to your salary. They also negotiate for generous health care, retirement benefits, sick leave, and maternity and paternity benefits as well. Oh, there's 2 more things I want you to know about labor unions. Number 1, there are regular union meetings. So every union member's voice is heard, and I'll tell you something, you can shoot your mouth off as much as you want. Why? Because the meeting is closed to company management. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, you should know that there's a fee for labor union representation. No work is free, but the dues that union members pay each month are minimal compared to the huge amount of benefits the union members get in return. So why did I choose to talk about the labor union movement today, or labor unions in general? Because the power the labor unions hold is huge, and has provided real economic benefits justice. So if you're interested in working under a labor union in order to secure your future, at least in economic terms, seek out work in the public sector, which are jobs in either city, county, or state governments. These days, pretty much only government jobs are unionized. And one more thing I want you to take away from the show segment today on labor unions is this. The economic power that labor unions hold is the reason the Republican Party and the corporations that they represent are always trying to destroy them. Because once labor unions are destroyed, corporations can then maximize their profits at the expense of their employees' economic security and dignity. So don't believe the lies you hear about labor unions on Conservative Talk Radio. That's the show for today. Next week, I'll be talking about these 2 topics. We'll be looking at the compilation of the voting record of Senator Richard Shelby and Senator Doug Jones. And also, I'll be answering the question of exactly what is democratic socialism. Till next week, remember, you deserve the government you vote for.